Hello, everyone, and welcome to Critical Path Institute's Rare Orphan and Pediatric Disease Programs webinar series. My name is Dominique Cruz, and I'm a Senior Project Manager for the Rare Disease Cures Accelerator Data and Analytics Platform, or RDCA DAP for short. And it's my pleasure to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Hope on the Horizon for ADTKD Patients. Before we get started with the presentation, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please place them in the Q&A box for our presenters and panelists. The chat function is disabled for all participants just to make sure we don't miss any questions that pop up, and all participant lines are muted just to reduce background noise. This presentation is recorded and it will be made available on CPATH's YouTube channel for on-demand viewing post the presentation. And if you have any questions throughout the presentation that don't make it into the Q&A box, please feel free to email us. We are more than happy to follow up offline. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our presenters for today. Sharon McGroder is a retired social science researcher and currently the executive director of the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation, a patient-led nonprofit working to halt ADTKD through education, patient advocacy, and community building. Joining Sharon is Richard Nelson, who is a lifelong patient advocate on the national level. He founded the Rare Disease Kidney Foundation in 2018 and has tirelessly worked to lead collaborations with leading patient, academic, and industry partners in the space. And with that, I'll hand it over to Sharon and Rich, who will kick off the webinar with a short presentation.
Thank you so much, Dom, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm thrilled to be here and tell you more about ADTKD. And after I discuss the disease itself, Rich will talk about the foundation, the work that we're doing, our mission, and our goals for the future. So the three defining features of ADTKD really are in the title, which is autosomal dominant tubulointerstitial kidney disease. So of course, the autosomal dominant part means that 50-50 chance of a parent passing it down to each child, regardless of child gender, and it does not skip generations. So what that means for me personally is that odds are at least one of my two grown adult sons has this disease. Tubulointerstitial is where the disease occurs. So it's in the tubulointerstitial tissues, the tubules, and not the glomeruli. And as you all know, that's the filtering function of the kidney. So, and a lot of, maybe most, I'm not quite sure, kidney diseases are in the glomerulus, which is why spilling protein or blood into the urine is a good indicator that there might be some kidney disease. But there is a bland urinary sediment with our disease, and so it's confounding to nephrologists who are hesitant to think kidney disease until really the EGFR and the creatinine levels move into dangerous directions. And then third, of course, it's a kidney disease that is slowly progressing over many years. And research has shown that end-stage renal failure occurs sometime between age 20 and 80. So it's a very wide age of onset for kidney failure, both within a population and within a given family even, with the average age of end-stage renal failure being 45. And you can see I'm getting this information from Dr. Anthony Blyer and his colleagues at Wake Forest University School of Medicine, the Rare Inherited Kidney Disease Research Team, who, among others internationally, are doing a lot of research on this disease. And they recently came out with an updated review, 2025. So I highly recommend you take a look at their review article. Next slide. So you might be wondering, why haven't I heard of this disease, or is it a new disease? And it's not. Prior to the discovery of the pathogenic variant in the UMOD gene, ADTKD UMOD was known as either FJHN1 or uromodulin-associated kidney disease or medullary cystic kidney disease type 2. So those are diseases I'm guessing you have heard of. But as they've done more research and certainly finding the underlying pathogenic genes, variants in the genes causing this umbrella condition of ADTKD, they've decided to rename it for clarity's sake. So likewise, prior to 2013, which is when the pathogenic variant of the MUC1 gene was discovered, ADTKD MUC1 was known as medullary cystic kidney disease type 1. And there have been other pathogenic variants discovered since then, including the REN and APOA4 and other genes. And again, you can read all about that in Dr. Bleier's review article of 2025. So to date, most patients, I think 90%, given the various samples that folks have looked at, studied, have either UMOD or the MUC1 variant. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the diagnosis of ADTKD is really straightforward and yet challenging, because the most definitive test is genetic testing, and yet a lot of nephrologists don't necessarily think to go to that, even if there's a family history of kidney disease, chronic kidney disease in the family. And so oftentimes there's kidney imaging and kidney biopsies which do not help diagnose this disease. And they may be important, obviously, for diagnosis. There could be a good reason for doing those tests when you're really trying to figure out what's going on. But as it turns out, they're unnecessary and more invasive and more expensive than just doing the genetic testing to begin with. Now, a commercially available kidney multi-gene panel will identify UMOD mutations. So I know Natera, GeneDx, other commercially testing labs have hundreds of genetic kidney diseases they test for, and UMOD is one of them. But unfortunately, MUC1 is not. And that has to do with the difficulty and the many steps and the complications in diagnosing or in doing the typing or you can tell that's not my area of expertise, but it's just more difficult to diagnose genetically for MUC1. So currently, MUC1 testing in the US is only available through the Rare Inherited Kidney Disease Research Team at Wake Forest. That's Dr. Tony Bleier's team, and it's as part of his research. So it's free, and because it's part of research, but there is a challenge because it is only available at one location in the US. And so efforts are being made to introduce it or have it be on multi-gene panels commercially. That will take a little bit of time. Next slide. So while ADTKD is underdiagnosed, it's not uncommon. It's the second most common genetic kidney disease after PKD, affecting an estimated 75,000 to 100,000 in the US and an estimated 2 million worldwide. Now, when you think of rare kidney diseases or rare diseases in general in the US, it's defined as fewer than 200,000 cases. So clearly, at 100,000 at best, ADTKD is considered a rare disease, but it's also the most common rare genetic kidney disease because PKD has over 600 cases. So when you think about rare disease in the kidney space and a rare genetic kidney disease, ADTKD tops the list. And we estimate that every nephrologist in the US is likely to have between 3 and 10 MUC1 or UMOD patients. And so it's underdiagnosed, it's invisible, but it's not uncommon. And we're trying to spread the word on that. Next slide, please. In terms of the prevalence, current estimates put it at about 5% of monogenetic kidney disease cases in the US. And for comparison, PKD, they estimate it's between 10 and 15% of all monogenetic kidney disease cases. And the prevalence accounts for between 3 and 16 cases per million. And again, for comparison, Goodpasture syndrome is about 1 per million cases, and cystinosis is 1.6 million. Next slide, please. So there's currently no treatment or cure. And Rich will tell you that's why we as a foundation exist. But I do want to let you know that Dr. Anna Greca and her amazing team at the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard have identified a promising drug-like compound that could halt the devastating impacts of MUC1 and UMOD. And the Broad has licensed this compound to NewCo, which is a biotech company, to develop a treatment and to work with pharma to bring it to a clinical trial as early as 3 years from now. Next slide. This is from Dr. Anna Greca's presentation at RKDF. We have an annual summit on ADTKD. And she did a presentation, which you can see here. If you went to YouTube, looked up Rare Kidney Disease Foundation, her presentation from this past March will be one of the first ones to pop up. And she was talking about therapeutic advances and where they are in terms of finding a treatment and eventually a cure for ADTKD. And she points out that this middle path here, first of all, they've already found the gene, they've already developed systems to study the gene, and they've already discovered this compound that that shows hope for at least stemming the damage. It won't reverse damage, at least this compound they're studying. But they found they're on their way for finding a treatment that will work. And so the middle pathway there is really showing the first project that's out where they think that a clinical trial could begin in the next 3 years, and hopefully sooner. To the left, there's other next generation treatments that she talks about. I won't go into them because they're not my foray, my expertise. But I really encourage you to watch her 20-minute presentation that she recently gave. And then on the right, you can see gene therapy, CRISPR, progress being made in that area to cure, to prevent the onset of the disease, of the clinical symptoms to begin with. I might also add that Anna Greca has an amazing TED Talk. We called this one TED Talk 2.0 because she did one in 2023 in April, which is on the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation's website on the homepage if you want to watch. But she does an amazing job describing how they how they found the gene, how they then discovered what she's calling nodal pathways that not only help, and I think this is really important for all rare diseases, that when you find a nodal pathway in the biology of how a gene leads to, cell death and disease, she found that it's through a toxic proteinopathy that causes the cells to die. And she noted that that's a similar death process of cells that occurs in ALS and in Alzheimer's disease. So not only is her research pushing forward a treatment for our disease, ADTKD, it can lay the groundwork, and they're doing amazing work in their Letters to Cure initiative to use that information to help solve other problems of even not so rare diseases, but genetic diseases. So, an investment in a single therapy for a single gene often turns out to be an investment in identifying additional genes with a similar, pathway of damage, and can really cure or treat a lot more diseases. Next slide, please. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to our president, Rich Nelson.
Thank you. I'll go ahead. Thank you, Sharon. You can see why the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation is moving forward is because of our executive director and our team, all volunteers. And thank you, Soren, and your superb team for setting up this webinar. Very impressed with the group that we're presenting to today. 8 years ago, I met with Anna Greca in Boston, and she became aware of our family, and she said, "If you'll find the patients, we'll find the cure." Actually, it was we'll find the treatment and a cure. So we're really been very, very fortunate of working with Dr. Greca and also Tony Blair over these 8 years. We're all volunteers. Next slide, please, with this disease. We're in the business of halting ADTKD across generations through education, patient advocacy, and community building, as you can read here. We don't talk about trying to increase the awareness. We're trying to scale the awareness, especially among nephrologists and their patients. We've tried social media and other ways, but it's really the 10,000 clinical nephrologists that have these forgotten patients in each of their practices. What's exciting is after working on this for many, many years, I was originally worked on this at the Mayo Clinic for 23 years, and then fortunate to meet Anna Greca and Tony Blyer. But after hundreds of millions of dollars have been invested in finding a treatment for genetic kidney disease, we're finally on the cusp of, actually on the horizon of finding a treatment. And we call it we really term it as a promising treatment. The key here is genetic testing. Unfortunately, the 10,000 nephrologists, very, very few of them actually actively use genetic testing in their practice. We'd really like to understand how we can change that. That's why we're existing. Currently, that's our focus, is to find enough patients for a clinical trial, which is estimated to be as early as 3 years from now. Next slide, please. My father was a young doctor, young surgeon, who died at 43. He left 6 children. 4 inherited this disease, including myself. Like was explained earlier, I've had a transplant for 35 years. I've worked on this half of my life. First of all, at the Mayo Clinic, and now very fortunately with the Broad Institute and Wake Forest Medical School. As you look at this, there are 3 generations. When this picture was taken, we were celebrating my father's 100th birthday, what would have been. We were on a beautiful lake, and Bear Lake, and there are a number of future patients here that didn't have a clue that they would have a rare kidney disease. 4 of the 6 families here have that in their family, with 50% likely getting this. So really what that means is this disease didn't start with my dad, it started with his grandfather back in 1849. It was a spontaneous mutation. The important part is it came to 4 of us, and then now 21 children of those 4 families. That's why the Mayo Clinic was interested in analyzing our family and trying to diagnose and see what they could do. But it's the little kids on the front row that we're worried about now. There are 21 that are at 50% chance of having this disease. We've already got that gene, and it's just tragic. It's really a generational children's disease because their children will also have this disease at a much higher in much higher numbers. Next slide, please. That's kind of an emotional slide for me to present. It's all about, but there are hundreds of thousands of other families and individuals, as many as 2 million worldwide, that have this disease. The Rare Kidney Disease is the only patient organization in the United States providing the patient voice and expertise for accelerating a treatment for ADTKD patients and their families and their children and their children's children. Next slide, please. We have 1,300 what we call members, and you can see the breakout. And the breakout is actually a little smaller than the actual total number up at the top. So we have 440 patients and family members, but really the number is probably 25% higher than that because we didn't categorize the other ones. Next slide, please. So here's what we're working on. There's a clinical trial that the Broad and its NUCO and ANUCO are working on. It could be in as early as 3 years from now, which, after working on this for over 3 decades, that's a phenomenal pace. As we've already talked about, we've become the patient voice. We're very serious about this. Each of us spend a lot of time daily, even working on this. We're thrilled to be talking to this drug development audience and physicians and scientists today, thanks to Soren and his team at the CPATH. We're trying to continue, we're not trying, we are creating a supportive community of ADTKD patients, their families, and medical professionals that care for them. And really the key is, it seems to be, is the 10,000 clinical nephrologists that have 3 or 6 or 10 patients in each of their practice. Unfortunately, they're forgotten or invisible. When you can't diagnose them, what do you do? And that's the category I was in for many, many years, having started out at the Mayo Clinic and eventually finding out that I had MUC1 many years later, thanks to the Broad and Wake Forest. Next slide, please. And this is who we are. We'd love to have your feedback. We'd love to have you take the survey that will be sent after this by CPATH. And now we'll turn it back over to Nicole and Dominique.
Thank you, Sharon and Rich, for that presentation. It means a lot for you guys to share your experience and knowledge with us. So now we'll move into our Q&A panel discussion led by Dr. Soren Fidelis. Dr. Fidelis leads CPATH's Polycystic Kidney Disease Outcomes Consortium, or PKDOC. So I'll hand it off to you, Soren, to introduce the panel and kick off Q&A.
Thanks so much, Dom. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank Sharon and Rich for the wonderful presentation and evocative stories. And I would like to introduce Nadia Chaudhri, who is the third member of our panel. So Dr. Nadia Chaudhri is a senior physician and medical officer in the Division of Cardiology and Nephrology at US FDA. She's been at FDA since 2020, where she first joined with the Division of Rheumatology and Transplant Medicine, and then she moved to Cardiology and Nephrology in 2024, where she's working closely with Eliza Thompson and Rekha Kampati's team. At the Cardiology and Nephrology Division, her focus has been on reviewing applications for rare glomerular and tubular kidney diseases. Nadia is a board-certified adult nephrologist and completed a residency and fellowship at University of Maryland in 2012. So we're thrilled to have her here. So Wendy, if there's questions, please route them my way, but I'll kick it off on our side with a few questions for the panel. So again, Rich and Sharon have described the disease in the presentation, so there's a wonderful overview. And as you guys heard, ADTKD is a genetically well-defined disease, but very heterogeneous from a clinical presentation. So from your perspective, and this is for Sharon, Rich, and Nadia, what are the biggest barriers, or what would be the biggest barriers that would prevent therapies from reaching ADTKD patients today, knowing what we know about the disease, presentation and regulatory paradigm, etc. So I'll start it off with Sharon.
Good question. Thanks, Sharon. It's really backing up the barriers to finding therapeutics and getting them on the market is identifying the prevalence of this disease. It's which they're backing up another step requires, educating nephrologists and encouraging them to do genetic testing on their patients with a family history especially those with a bland urinary sediment. Just some red flags that should be low-lying fruit, I think, for recommending genetic testing. So I think understanding the prevalence, identifying the patients, encouraging nephrologists. I understand that in 15 minutes, there's only so much you can do if there's a disease that doesn't have a treatment. But then that's a sort of a negative feedback loop if you're not doing things to set the stage for identifying the disease and working toward a treatment by finding patients to help both with the prevalence and the raw numbers for a clinical trial. So, it's changing the mindset of nephrologists, not just to think about genetic testing, but to not throw up their hands and say, well, if there's no treatment, I've got 15 minutes with them. Why would I talk about something like, oh, you might have this disease, but there's nothing I can do for you. And so it doesn't happen. So I think it's changing the mindset of nephrologists, as Rich was saying, educating them about this disease, encouraging them to do genetic testing. And that puts us on a pathway toward having the prevalence numbers we need to entice pharma to get involved and then really move the drug development process forward.
Thank you, Sharon. Rich? Well, she always gives a great response, and in her family, her family looks a lot like mine, with 4 out of 6 having this disease. Really, it's a blind spot within, in my opinion, from a physician, from a patient standpoint, within medicine. My son was a physician, and he was trying to decide which area to go into. I was hoping he'd go into nephrology for personal reasons, for the family reason. The family business is we got to solve this. We've got to find a way as patients to accelerate this. But he didn't go into nephrology. There are barriers within nephrology that innovation does not work. It just doesn't work. The government owns because of regulation. Lots of barriers are there. Now, I don't think that our patient organization is going to reduce the barriers, but some way, if we could just focus on genetic testing, just one thing, that would open this up more than anything else. And if we could, I've already challenged my own nephrologist to change, to find a patient in each of their 15 practices within that clinic. And if we could replicate that to some of the large clinics, like Dallas has 115 nephrologists, then we would have enough patients for the clinical trial when the science is there in as early as 3 years from now. So it's really a very, very promising area. Thanks, Rich. Very insightful. So Nadia, regarding these considerations from your vantage point as a regulator, what do you think? I think you're muted, Nadia. Let me see. I don't see.
Let's see. Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
perfect.
Okay. So I first wanted to thank Sharon and Richard for their wonderful presentation, and also for sharing your personal story, Nelson. As I practiced in clinical nephrology prior to coming to the FDA, so definitely hear what you're saying, and that I think as clinical nephrologists as well need to be more aware that nephrology-related diseases, more of them that we're treating probably have a genetic background that we're not aware of. I think we need to start looking at it the way oncology is looked at, and that each cancer has a specific genetic mutation. So yes, increasing awareness, scaling up awareness, specifically from my side of it, regulator drug development side, we are so excited about seeing the movement in this space. Specifically with CPATH and the work that Dr. Blair's group is doing. Collecting the natural history data is going to be critical and how we can use trial data to see effective therapy. So to bring safe and effective therapies, it's going to be very critical in how we're going to be able to see whether therapy is meeting, clinical effectiveness, is meeting the bar. And I will say, particularly with the FDA, not just in the last year, but the FDA has been particularly interested in supporting rare diseases. There's a lot of pathways for rare diseases and incentivizing companies. So we definitely encourage early engagement and are big champions of CPATH's work. Hopefully we'll be able to see something soon for patients.
Thank you, Nadia. We'll go to the Q&A shortly, but I wanted to follow this up and really pose the obvious question, like, for the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation and for patient foundations in generally, and consortia like the ones at CPATH, like what role can these stakeholders play in helping de-risk rare kidney disease programs, right? So industry is willing to engage, so drug development can be accelerated. And all of you have answered this to some extent, but I wanted to see if you wanted to add more from your vantage point, specifically Sharon and Rich, from the work that you are doing and the work that we are all collaborating on with Tony Blair and so forth. Sharon?
Yeah, I think it's just scaling the awareness, but then also the important messaging about, rare diseases are collectively common. Working on a treatment for a single disease can often lead to insights and discoveries that will benefit drug development for other diseases that share a similar sort of pathology or in our case, the toxic proteinopathies that kill the kidney cells also can affect brain cells and ALS and, Alzheimer's. Again, I really encourage you to watch Dr. Anna Greca's TED Talk on our website. So I think a lot of it is just, it's messaging, it's partnerships, it's us continuing to build our community of certainly patients and families, but medical professionals and genetic counselors and, dietitians and all of whom we have in our database who are members of RKDF, and to continue to build awareness and build our membership group so that they can also spread the word and can, when the time comes, provide input, provide the patient voice and patient perspectives on, I know that's another question you had about, what outcomes matter to them. We've got a ready population of patients and family members with their perspectives, because it is a family disease after all. Even if you're not the one with the disease, you're living with someone or know someone who has the disease. They'd be happy to tell you what their lives are like, how it's limiting them. And I think just continuing to share those stories and those insights is certainly something that we can do it as a patient advocacy foundation.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Sharon. Rich.
let me chime in also. I want to compliment the FDA for their willingness to be engaged. Eliza Thompson is frequently involved with us, with others, and Nadia. I think this is fantastic to have regulators hear the patient view, which in our case is hidden or invisible or forgotten. And it's not a small population. I know when I was at the Mayo Clinic working on this for 23 years with Dr. Peter Harris and Vicente Torres, it just, finally we are connecting the dots. We just need to connect more dots to get the message out to nephrologists to find that population. They're there. Anna Greca at the Broad wouldn't be using the number of 2 million estimated patients worldwide and they're suffering. My sister was on dialysis for 20 years. I elected not to use a photo of one of my other sisters today because it's the suffering they go through with fistulas and dialysis. And here, 40%, up to 40% of those on dialysis don't know why they're on dialysis. Tell me why that isn't a driving force in solving this, accelerating this. Anyway, sorry, got off on my tangent there.
Thanks. Thanks, Rich. And Nadia, from your vantage point, well, let me add to the question when we think about the work that foundations and consortia do, for example, building registries, natural history studies, real world data, and leveraging that to build disease progression models and find potential biomarkers like prognostic biomarkers, which is an area of huge unmet need in ADTKD. How can we leverage those efforts, and how can everybody come together, including regulators, industry, foundations, to support that engagement?
So, yeah, exactly. I guess for us, it really is just championing what you're doing and to encourage continued support and data sharing. We really cannot, I think, speak enough to how important data sharing is between different stakeholders and developing these registries that will have the database to then be able to find biomarkers that could be then used to be as either reasonably likely or validated, based on the data that's available, and then be used in clinical trials that will be feasible, recognizing the specific challenges with ADTKD in that it is slowly progressive. So to be able to design a trial that will not take, however many years to get to a clinical endpoint. So biomarkers in this space are particularly critical. And, I'm currently sort of working in the rare glomerular disease space. We've seen that can lead to, we worked with different groups in looking at proteinuria for IgA nephropathy in particular. And so that has led to redesigning trials, rethinking how we're looking at trials. And so, as Richard said, specifically being involved at DCN, it's been very exciting because we're willing to be flexible. We're willing to work with what we have, recognizing that these diseases either are challenging in terms of how they're presenting or the terms of the patient base. But really having this natural history is going to be critical for us to understand what is the natural progression of this disease for patients who are on standard of care therapy, not on this particular therapy that's being evaluated. So we want these to come to this space. So the importance of data sharing, bringing data together, so that we can then come to the point where we can look at trial designs for these.
Thank you so much, Nadia. Super helpful. So we have a question from Susan Raleigh. And she's asking, what specifically can we as patients do to help find more people with ADTKD? And Susan and Rich are particularly well equipped to answer that. So do you wanna take that, Sharon and Rich?
Sure. So Susan is part of our team, so thank you for the question, Sue. And I think in all the work that you're doing for the foundation, how hard we're trying to find more people. And we do a lot of events. We go to a lot of mostly nephrologist focused or kidney health professional events. We have a booth. In some cases, we're looking to present more on panels. In terms of patients, it's hard. Social media, we try our best to kind of get messages out there. I think a big piece could be, really it's the cascade testing. Once we find someone who has the disease and is interested in joining the foundation or volunteering, or somehow when we connect with them, it's then a concerted effort to say, so if you've just been diagnosed, chances are your family members, might they be interested? And, do you want to talk to a genetic counselor who will help you think about how to raise this with other family members so they can get tested? So it's finding that, excuse me, that first case, and then it's encouraging them to talk to their family members about genetic testing. But again, our big strategy is raising awareness among the nephrologists who see these kidney patients every day, and to let them know to think more about if they might have this disease, talk to them about this disease, and we're providing guidance to nephrologists on how to ask about this disease in a 15-minute appointment that is, manageable. It gives you the information you need to decide if, you want to order genetic testing for them if they agree that's what they want. So it's direct patient outreach, and largely it's through the medical professionals who see these patients.
Soren, I think she's answered the question right on. It's we as patients need to have the kind of relationship with our nephrologists and challenge them and help them understand the critical need for genetic testing. This is not an expensive, intrusive, way to diagnose MUC1 and UMOD. It's low cost or no cost. But it's not being used by nephrologists. And if they knew that, I've challenged my own nephrologist in a practice of 15. I call him a physician champion. Help us by June 1st to find 15 ADTKD patients within your practice of 15 providers. And he's taking up that cause. Hopefully we can come back and celebrate that and see if we can get into some of the larger groups like Dallas.
Thanks, Rich. So we have another question here, but let me just ask one more question. And you guys touched upon the importance of incorporating the patient voice as part of drug development programs. And obviously Nadia is from the cardiology nephrology division, not the PRO, but I'm just gonna put it out there. When we think about incorporating the patient perspectives as part of drug development programs, what role can patient-reported outcomes play in supporting trials, and how does FDA think about or look for what do they look for when evaluating new PRO instruments in the context of a disease like ADTKD? And I realize you can deflect the question, Nadia, because it's not, doesn't fit perfectly, but if you want to comment on it.
Yeah, no, of course. So what you highlighted, I think is important to know. Is not every, I feel like sometimes the FDA can be a black box for people, but we have actually CDER, so the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, which is what I'm a part of, actually has a patient-focused drug development staff that are dedicated to patient outreach, incorporating patient voice from even the translational preclinical point to understand what are we looking for, what risks are we willing to accept in these particular disease spaces. The FDA leads patient listening sessions. There's externally led patient-focused drug development sessions that we join. And then again, there's a specific patient-reported outcome disease division of clinical outcome assessments. So they are specifically experts in how to collect research on patient data and on these clinical assessments that could then be used to assess effectiveness of therapies. And more of those are even coming into the nephrology space. We're looking at some specifically for ADPKD or polycystic kidney disease, which has a similar challenge in that it's very slow progressing. So to try to look at an assessment that's clinically meaningful, that is important to patients, that may have even be assessed and validated in a different disease space. Can we translate that to kidney disease? So there are a lot of different avenues. So if we can't find a particular lab biomarker, definitely encourage outreach to looking at clinical, assessments that may be feasible. And again, your registry, CPATH's registry, Dr. Blair's work in helping to also collect data on what would be important to patients, patient-centered outcomes will be very important.
Thank you, Nadia. Super, super helpful. So we have a question from the audience here. For Sharon and Rich, and this is more general, but and you already alluded to some of it, but the question is the research on possible treatments currently at the preclinical stage? When do we see it advancing to the clinical testing stage, and what approaches are being tried in the space right now? Be it gene therapy, small molecules, etc. Do you wanna comment on that, Sharon or Rich?
I do. I'll take the last question first, which path is moving fastest, and it is the drug-like compound that they're looking into. It would be a pill or an injection or something like that. I wish I could remember the name of the other therapy that she talked about, but that's a little bit slower. But also they're researching it now. And again, if you watch her presentation from our summit a month ago on our YouTube channel, she'll talk much more about that. The slide that I presented, she's got a whole 20 minutes on these therapeutic things. So I really encourage you to go there. And CRISPR, I think that, I don't know compared to the other, but that's not as far ahead as this drug-like compound that they're working on. In terms of what stage they're in, we don't have for proprietary reasons, we're not engaged in the actual process of, when it goes for preclinical and phase 1 and things like that. So I do know that there have been animal trials using a promising compound, that they're using this compound now to test other compounds to compare efficacy. And I do believe those are in animal studies. I don't know when human studies, other than, Anna Greco is hoping that given the 2 steps forward, I should have mentioned that about her mountain slide, which was so great because, you'll go up a couple steps and you might have to come back down, or you double back, or you got to switch back, so it's not a linear process at all. So, we're not purposely being obtuse about when the clinical trials on humans might start. Anna says she's very hopeful. She said this at our summit. She's very bullish that there will be 1 or 2 clinical trials in the next 3 to 5 years on 1 or more treatments. So that's as best as I can answer that part of the question.
Thanks, Sharon. Rich?
Yeah. The question I've got is why, in the PKD world, which I was in for many, many years, 23 years at the Mayo Clinic, and then also on their national board for 6 years, about 10 years ago, why haven't there been more treatments? We're not even talking about a cure for PKD. And again, no knock on my former friends and colleagues at the PKD board, but we're very, very excited after hundreds of millions of dollars have been invested in research at major institutions like the Mayo. We're excited that Peter Harris is on our National Scientific Advisory Board. He's now challenged. He's one of our physicians, one of our champions with his own group of 150 or whatever it is, nephrologists and genetic testing teams. He took our materials back. We met with him at ASN. He's very excited about that. But this is the first time that a treatment has come forward to halt genetic kidney disease. I think it is a game changer, especially with the kind of size of the population that is invisible. It's been hidden for forever. Anyway, comment
Right.
there.
Yeah, no, thanks, Rich. And I'll comment on the PKD part. So again, there was a lot of growing pains, right? The genes for PKD were identified really 30 years ago, right? Um, and then people thought, okay, like we're just gonna figure out what the proteins do, and then we're gonna have treatments right away. But as it turns out, the biology of PKD is very complicated, and understanding the mechanisms has taken a long time. Not that we understand everything about the disease, but we have a much better idea. And that's why I think there's a lot of good targets that are being pursued and a lot of trials, right? I think PKD will have 10 to 15 compounds in trials in the next
Oh,
3 to 5 years, right?
fantastic.
And these are based on targets that are very promising, right? And then the regulatory paradigm has advanced a lot, right? And this is the work, from the PKD consortia and all the stakeholders, and obviously Lisa Thompson and her division working together to get qualify TKV as a prognostic enrichment biomarker, and then now as a surrogate biomarker, reasonably likely surrogate, right? So not fully validated, but that has opened the floodgates really for industry to kind of look at PKD very closely. And I think it's really the golden age for PKD. ADTKD is sort of PKD, from 2010 PKD basically, right? So the mechanisms are being understood better. The natural history studies and disease progression modeling is being done for ADTKD, and you see like there's momentum growing, right? So I think ADTKD will, I would say in 10 years, will be hopefully at the same stage we are now with ADPKD, right? So yeah, it's not a magic bullet, right? It takes a village and for everybody to work together, sitting at the same table, right? So that's what we're trying to do, right? And you guys are
Absolutely. Thank
driving
you.
the process.
Thank you very much.
So we had oh, I see. So I guess Sharon has answered the question because we had a question regarding allowing Canadian patients to participate in any upcoming trials. But yeah,
To be
but
determined.
yeah, to be determined, exactly. Let's see, do we have another question here? Uh, yeah, I think, well, again, I had a couple more questions about in vitro models, which are of high interest to FDA right now, like this new approach methodologies, organoids, etc. And I don't know if Sharon and Rich, you want to comment on that, but as we know, not just from ADTKD, but ADPKD and other kidney diseases, right? Those approaches are rapidly advancing, and I think they will play a pivotal role in accelerating drug discovery, right? As better models for ADTKD are advanced, in terms of organoid, kidney on chip, and in fact, we are looking at that very closely as well in our work with Tony Blair's group and Benjamin Friedman and Jonathan Himmelfarb's groups. So we are trying to build something in that respect, building ADTKD in vitro models. Yeah.
Can I
Sorry, go ahead.
mention something? Um, in terms of patient perspective, lived experiences, I think, when the time comes in the drug development process, where you're in particular looking at patient outcomes and what outcomes should be assessed. I mean, my brain is already going with so many ideas. I mean, I am a researcher by training and I've been a social science researcher for 30 years. So I know about, and I've done, randomized control trials, we call it in the social service space, on various programs or policies aimed at children and families. So I know enough about it, translates enough into, other areas. And of course, the outcomes are key. If you pick the wrong outcomes or if they're not measured appropriately and all that kind of great stuff that then it provides a skewed picture of what the treatment, how effective or safe even it is. And so I love the idea, especially about getting our patient voice for outcomes. And I personally, I had to stop working in my 50s because I didn't have the energy to. I'm stage 4, so I'm pre-transplant, pre-dialysis. Hopefully, I won't need dialysis. I also have the MUC1 variant, like Rich, um, and I just think that economically, the cost of kidney disease in terms of lost wages, GDP, however you want to measure it, and just the self um, esteem or value that comes from contributing and the humility of not being able to work in a field that you've been doing full time for 30 years. I'm glad I have this position, but I think, what is it? What outcomes are keeping you from being employed? Is it fatigue? Is it brain fog? Is it, you don't have the energy to walk to the corner and back, and your past job required that you walk a lot. And so I think it's really important to hear, activities of daily living kinds of outcomes, but also outcomes that really impact a patient's livelihood. Because that's critical. That's always critical, maybe especially in this economy. I don't know, but I want to always keep that on the front burner, that people lose their jobs or have to quit long before they're ready to because of this disease.
Thanks, Sharon. Rich?
Quick follow-up. I want to ask Nadia, if you had this disease and you came from a large family like I come from, and others are on dialysis, like my sister for 20 years, like my sister and other sister has had 2 transplants, likely will go back on dialysis. What would you, if you were the patient, what would you advise us? What would you advise us, and what would you do as a regulator? You've already commented on that part, but be a patient for a minute.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. And I think it's hard to be patient. It's hard to live with this and hear that things are up and coming when on a daily basis you're dealing with this. But I can only I think try to encourage you further to keep doing the work that you're doing. Be persistent. Don't lose hope. And we are here. We want to work with you. We want to be able to bring more treatments to patients who are dealing with these on a daily basis. And as Sharon had said, that it's impacting so many different facets of life. And I think, as you had mentioned, touched earlier, unfortunately, the way kidney disease was, we can sort of touch on the whole government pay scale stuff before, but it was mismanaged in that, when you were at the end, that's when patients were getting, their services covered for end-stage kidney disease. And so, I'm sure it's extremely challenging to be patient and to go through everything that you've gone through, but to know that we are here. We want to work with the patient groups. We want to work with groups like Critical Path, encouraging investment in this space, encouraging research in this space. We're willing to be flexible. We're not, we definitely, and what I will say, having Elisa as a sort of leader at the helm, definitely not using a one-size-fits-all approach, knowing that each disease, will require sort of specific support and data, and hopefully, but then leveraging data from other spaces as well. So using all of these, and I think the FDA in particular too has been very, championing these sort of rare disease spaces where it's particularly challenging and trying to get treatments out before that would take forever. So hopefully for everyone who is dealing with and living with ADTKD, we'll have something, on the horizon.
Thank you.
So much.
Great response. Look forward to working with you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Well, I think we're close to the end of the seminar. So I'm going to thank the panelists, Sharon, Rich, and Nadia, for the wonderful insights and conversation. And I'll turn this over back to Dominique. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Sharon.
Sharon. Thanks, everyone. And thank
Thank
you
you.
everyone who attended. We'll follow up with the webinar recording via email once available. And before we sign off, we are excited to let everyone know that registration is now open for CPATH's Global Impact Conference, which will be September 15th and 16th in Washington, D.C. And with that, thanks again, and hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you
everyone.
all.